Alright, so I have a 2004 Audi. It's a 3.0 automatic, and it's got a check engine light P0741, and that's related to the transmission. And I already tried changing the transmission oil and the oil filter, but that didn't work. So the next step is to replace the torque converter, and that's gonna require taking out the transmission. So I'm gonna remove this. It's gonna be a 17mm, one of these.
These are on very tight.
That's loose. Alright, so for the metal exhaust hanger, you can't really unbolt it because there's another bolt holding the exhaust bracket on the middle above the drive shaft, and I can't really reach that, so I just took it out of this. Alright, so the drive shaft support bearing carrier, the bolts are already out because I took them out when I was taking off the exhaust hanger. So right now I'm removing the drive shaft, and they're held on by 6, I don't know if it's 6mm, but like a 6 Allen. And I don't have a socket, so I can't use the impact. So, and these are on pretty hard. So what I did was I just found one of these keys, Allen key, put it in there, and then I couldn't get it loose like that. So what I did was I used a wrench and then just did this like that, get some leverage on it, and then you can get it loose. Alright, so right now I'm going to get the bottom 3 loose first. Alright, so I got these 3 Allen bolts loose, and now I'm gonna put the car in neutral and take off the e-brake so I can spin the drive shaft. Alright, e-brake off. So let's see, I need those top 3. So that should be these 3 right here. Put it back in park. Brake. Alright, so I got 4 out of the 6 bolts out, and I'm gonna leave those 2 in, and then I'm gonna put back these bolts hand tight just so it holds the center of the drive shaft. And then right now I'm going to do the rear 6, those 6 Allen bolts. So I got most of the bolts in the front of the drive shaft and in the rear. And before I take out the drive shaft, I'm just gonna mark it up real quick where they line up. So I don't know if you can see, but I put red dots where they line up, so when I put it back together, I know that it's going back on right.
What I gotta do is both hands.
Alright, so right now I got all 6 bolts loose in the front and the back, and the drive shaft's still not coming out, so it's kind of stuck. So see how there's like a line right, where's my finger, right there? See how there's like a line? So in front of that line there's a couple millimeters of this of the bushing or something, and that goes inside this metal piece of the transmission. So I'm gonna try spinning it around and hitting it with the hammer to see if I can get this loose, because right now it's stuck. So this took me a good half an hour to try to get out. I had to put the car in neutral and then turn the drive shaft while I put a screwdriver on the edge right here at an angle like this. So I would hit it like this with the rubber mallet as I spun the drive shaft around like this, so it would loosen up, and then it'll pop out like that, and that's where it separates. Alright, so for the rear of the drive shaft, it did not work with the hammer and screwdriver method. So what I did was, let me see if I can get it back in there yet. So you see how this spins? So what I did was I used this propane torch, heat up this outer ring where it goes into the diff while it spins, and then it'll pop out by itself. You don't even need to hit it. So as you spin and you heat up this outer ring, it will pop out like that. Okay, now the drive shaft is out. So for these CV axle bolts that connected to the transmission, they're let me check. They're 10 triple square sockets, and I used the impact gun. I don't see any other way of me loosening those bolts without one of these. Removing it, so I want to remove this heat shield right here. It looks like it's two 6mm Allens. Alright, so there's actually 3 bolts holding onto the heat shield, and they're 6mm Allens. Alright, so I got the CV axle removed, and that was a little difficult because of the tight spacing. So, you know, it's just 1 bolt right here and then 6 bolts in the back. And then once you get those, get all the bolts off, you want to put the key on, on, so at least you can turn the steering wheel so the steering wheel is not locked. And then you want to turn this. Well, first of all, once you get this axle off the transmission, you want to push it towards the front of the car because there's a little cavity right here that you can work with. And then once that end is over there, you can push out the teeth that was right here on the CV axle, and then you can take it out through. So it's gonna be like this. Or let me see. Yeah, so when I took it out, it was kind of like this, right? The axle on the inside, and then it just will pop out from the rear, like that. And now I'm just gonna do the same to the other side. Alright, so I just got the CV axle out on the driver's side, and when I was removing the heat shield that goes above the bolts on the transmission side, I actually stripped one of these bolts because I think it was dirty. So when I put my socket in, it was either not going in all the way, or it was going in not straight. And I stripped this bolt, and what I did to get it out was I just got an Allen key, and then I heated it up with a torch, and then I think that expands this, so you know, heat expands metal, this gets bigger, and I just stick it in, and then it cracked loose. So yeah, that's how I got that stripped bolt out. Alright, so right now I'm gonna drain the transmission oil. So that hole in the back middle, that's the fill plug, is gonna be a 17mm hex, and then the drain plug is gonna be a 8mm hex. And then, so yeah, I'm just gonna loosen the fill and then loosen the drain, and then I'm just gonna drain out the oil. Alright, so next, gotta remove this sensor from the transmission bell housing, and it's gonna be a T30 Torx, and then just have an extension and a ratchet, and it should be easy. Alright, so you want to remove this 6 hex bolt right here that holds the bracket for the sensor, so it makes it easier to unplug the sensor. Alright, so now you can pull the connector down and then unplug it. So just put a screwdriver right there, and then it should come out. Alright, so right in front of the transmission oil pan, there's another sensor, so you just want to flip the switch like that, and then that should unplug that connector. Alright, and then just take out this cover right here. And disconnect the battery. Alright, so the cats are held on by 3 bolts on each side connected to the exhaust manifold. And the bottom 2 on both sides is pretty easy, you can get them from the bottom. But the top bolts, it looks like you have to get it from the top. There's no other way. So to get the top bolt, what I did was unbolt 1, 2, 2 hex bolts right here. And then there's a Phillips screw right here that holds the dipstick in place. So you can just pull it out of place. And then there's also one more right here. That's another Allen, so I just backed it out so I have room to move this back and forth. And then that allowed me to get a 13mm wrench. So like this, and then it's gonna be behind this right here. So I just worked on it like that. And I'll say just be patient because there's not a lot of room for the wrench to turn, so it might take a while. Yeah, and then on this side, as you can see, I disconnected the coolant, and then I disconnected, or I just moved this out the way, and then I disconnected these 2 sensors right here. And then that allowed me to fit my, so I just, let me see. Yeah, so I just stuck my hand down here with the wrench, and then you can use this like a small 13mm wrench, and then just stick it down here, and then you can work the top bolt of the cat loose. And that might take a while too because there's not a lot of room for the wrench to turn, but you'll get it out for sure. Both sides, there's gonna be a spring with the bolt and nut that holds the cat downpipe to this right here. So you just undo that with 2 13mm. Alright, so the cats are unbolted and they're ready to come out, but they're not clearing the subframe, so I'm gonna remove the subframe. So first of all, get the engine support bar all set up, and then for this Audi, there's only 1 hook in the rear, so I just hooked that one directly to the bar, and then I just chained the front mount to this side just so it's not just hanging off one side. I'm gonna unbolt the sway bar bracket. It's held by 2 13mm bolts on each side. So I'm gonna just get those 4 bolts out. Alright, so the bracket's loose now, so I'm gonna remove this bolt. There's one on each side. It's a 16. So we're just gonna remove the sway bar. Alright, so I'm gonna support the subframe with the jack now, and then I'm going to remove these 3 18mm bolts, and then the 1 13mm holding the motor mount, and I'm gonna try to take this out. Alright, now that this mount is loose, you can remove this right here. I think these wires, you can just stick a screwdriver in and then it should come out. Alright, so hopefully you can see that it just clips in right there and on the back side. And this is what the piece looks like. So, you know, it just clips in. Alright, so with the mount out of the way, I'm going to take out the starter for now. And let's see if you can see it. I don't know if you can see it. But right here, there's the 1 bolt for the starter. It's gonna be a 16. And there's gonna be another one I'll show you later. But I'll just get this one for now for the starter, and then right there in the center. That's gonna be the second bolt for the starter. And then I'm just gonna take that out. Alright, so I just got the top starter bolt, and now the starter should be able to come out. And I just took that 16mm off with a wrench, and it was really tight, so I had to use some heat, and I just came out. So the starter should be loose now, and I'm gonna remove or disconnect the two lines that go from the transmission to this right here. So I'm just gonna disconnect that, and I'm gonna disconnect this too right here. Looks like two 10mm. All right, so I got these lines disconnected, and then so they're gonna be 19 on this thick hose side, and then those two bigger bolts are gonna be 22mm. So I just put a tranny jack in the back of the transmission just to support the weight in the rear, and then we have the bar holding the engine. So now I'm gonna remove these 3 bolts, and then this motor mount bolt. So just the same thing as I did to the other side. Okay, so next I'm gonna remove this bracket right here. It's just held on by 2 10mm bolts, one on each side. Alright, so now I'm gonna remove these 2 arms right here. And they're gonna be 18 bolt with an 18 nut on the back for both of them. And then I'm just gonna use a 18 on a ratchet, and then use an 18 wrench to hold the nut in the back, and that should be pretty straightforward. Alright, so I got these loose on both sides, and then on both sides the front will come out, but the rear bolt won't come out because there's not enough room for it to slide out because it hits the frame. So I'll just take that out later when I lower the subframe some more. But for now, I'm gonna remove these 2 13mm bolts for the transmission mount, and that's gonna be on both sides too. Alright, so pretty much everything is loose right now except this one bolt, and then these 3 18mm bolts on each side. So now I'm just gonna remove those slowly, because that should be the last thing holding the subframe in place, and I'm gonna do that on both sides. Alright, so I loosened all 3 bolts on this side, and then that just dropped this subframe down a little bit, enough for me to take out this bolt. So I'm gonna do that on the other side now. Alright, so now just slowly take out those 3 bolts on each side, and then be careful because the subframe should be coming down, and then just make sure that both arms on both sides are out of the way when you drop the subframe. Alright, so it's unbolted. I'm just gonna pull this out. Just like that. This side should be easy. Yeah, alright. Alright, so now I'm gonna lower the subframe. Alright, so on the driver's side, there's one of these little things right here. I don't know what it is, but it's actually bolted onto the subframe by 2 Allen bolts. I think they're size 4 or 5. But yeah, just take that out, and then you can lower your jack, and then the subframe will come out. You might have to wrestle with it a little bit, but yeah. So there's the subframe. Okay, so now we're under the engine where it connects to the transmission, and I'm gonna disconnect these 2. I think it's 22 for the big bolt, and then 19 for the small bolt, and then just take that out. So what I'm gonna do now is just turn the starter, and then see if I can flip it 180 degrees and move it out the way. Oh, there we go. So all I had to do was move it 180 degrees, and it just slid out the way, And I'm just gonna leave it hang because I don't need to totally remove it. Alright, so with the starter out of the way, you can see the inside of the transmission. So the one with the teeth is the flywheel. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm just gonna use a screwdriver and then just spin the flywheel until I see the bolts for the torque converter. So just like that, just keep spinning. Alright, so I spun the flywheel around a little bit, and then there you go. It looks like a Torx bolt. And then we're gonna remove that. Alright, so this bolt's gonna be a T55. It's gonna be a Torx. And then some people jam a screwdriver in here and then they crack it loose, or they have someone hold the crank and then break it loose. But I'm just gonna use an impact gun, and then so I got a socket and then a swivel bit and then extension, and then yeah, I'm gonna just impact that off. Alright, so there's one bolt out, and then I'm just gonna keep turning until I get all the bolts. So yeah, so it's hard to do with one hand, but you get the point. Just keep turning the flywheel until you see the next bolt. I'm gonna undo all the bolts for the transmission to the engine. They're gonna be either 16 millimeters or they're gonna be like a hex socket. Alright, so the bottom 3 bolts will be 8 hex sockets, size 8. Oh, and by the way, I'm just supporting the transmission in the front with the jack and a piece of wood. Alright, so the next bolt for the transmission is the one above the starter, and it's gonna be a 16 millimeter, and this one's on there tight. So what I do is I have a socket on there with a ratchet. And then what I'm gonna do is put a wrench there and then use that leverage to break that loose. This is the setup. So this is how you want your wrench, and then this will give you a lot more leverage to break it loose. So that's loose right there. Alright, so now on the driver's side, there's gonna be a nut right here and then a bolt going in from the transmission side, and then that's gonna be a size 8 hex bolt. So what I have is just an Allen key right there, just holding the bolt, and then I'm just loosening the nut, and that's pretty easy. Alright, so I just took this bolt right here out, and then next is there's 2 more 16 millimeter bolts above it, one right on top of another, so that one and that one. So just take that out. Alright, so I just took off those 2 bolts, and those were easy because I just used a big 1/2-inch drive ratchet with the socket and they broke loose. Alright, so for the bolt, for the top bolt for the transmission, I just have a socket on there, and then it's on a ratchet, and then this one was really tight, so I used a breaker bar like this, and then I'll just put it over the ratchet like that, and then just leverage it to break loose the bolt, and that worked. So now I'm gonna take that out. Alright, so the last bolt for the transmission is the top bolt on the passenger side. So it's gonna be like right on top, but just on the passenger side. And then I got a 16 socket on it with the ratchet, and then it's gonna be on there tight. So this is how I got it loose. Alright, so as you can see, there's the ratchet, and then what I'm gonna do is use a big wrench for some leverage. So I'm just gonna slip that on like that, and then you should be able to crack it loose like that. Like, just use the leverage from the wrench and it'll crack loose. Got the transmission on the driver's side. I'm just gonna unbolt these two 13mm nuts or bolts. Alright, so I got those two bolts out, and now there's gonna be one more right there. Just take that out. So that should be behind that heat shield, and there should be another 13mm bolt. So just remove that. Alright, so right now pretty much everything's disconnected and the transmission's ready to come out. The only thing left is the shift linkage, and I don't think I have enough space right now, so I'm just gonna take that off later when I get the transmission lower. But for now, I'm just gonna work my way around the bell housing, making sure everything's coming apart, and then I'm gonna slowly lower the jacks. So I got a trans jack and a regular jack, just supporting the front of the transmission. So I'm just gonna, evenly lower it and make sure it separates. All right, so as you can see, I got it pretty much freed up all the way, so it's not connected to the engine anymore. So right now I'm just gonna try to pull back on the transmission jack and this jack while lowering it at the same time and see how that goes. Alright, so right now the transmission is lowered, and I just use a pry tool to pry off the shifter cable. It just looks like it's a ball that's pushed into the shifter lever. So yeah, that's it. Alright, so there's the transmission. Wasn't that hard to get out. Just once you get all the bolts and you wiggle it back, it comes out. And then also notice how the cats are still there. I just unbolted the cats so I would have more clearance to get it out, but I don't really need to remove it completely, so I'm just gonna leave the cats there. But yeah, here's the transmission, and now we're gonna change the torque converter.